There's an old Venetian tale about a puppeteer who fell in love with his own marionette. Every night, he'd perform for empty theaters, convinced that the wooden doll's painted smile meant something profound. He died clutching those strings, never realizing he'd been dancing alone the entire time. The marionette, they say, is still hanging in that abandoned theater, smiling at nothing, waiting for someone new to pick up the strings. You know what's grotesque about modern love? It's not the lying or the cheating or even the slow fade of passion into grocery lists and mortgage payments. No, it's something far more insidious. It's the realization that you were never actually in the relationship at all. You were the venue, the stage, the convenient backdrop against which someone else performed their grand drama of self-discovery. Listen closely, and you can hear it, that wet, clicking sound of realization, like bones snapping back into place after years of dislocation. It's the sound a man makes when he finally understands that every "I love you" was actually "I love how you make me feel about myself." Every passionate kiss was her kissing her own reflection in your eyes. Every intimate moment was her using your body as a mirror to admire her own desirability. Schopenhauer wrote that we're all just will, blind, irrational force puppeting meat around, desperately trying to reproduce itself. But he missed the darker joke. Some of us aren't even the will anymore. We're the stage the will performs on, the threadbare velvet curtains, the creaking floorboards, the dim spotlight that illuminates someone else's one-woman show. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. and she's crying again. Not because she loves you, God no, but because you're the perfect audience for her performance of Tragic Heroine Act 3. You hold her, whisper the right lines, you've memorized them by now. Play your part as supporting actor number 1. But watch her eyes carefully in that darkness. They're not looking at you. They're looking through you at some imagined audience, checking if her tears are falling at the right angle. A 2024 study from the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that individuals with high narcissistic traits view romantic partners primarily as self-enhancement tools, rather than autonomous beings. The researchers called it instrumental love, using another human being the way you'd use a particularly flattering Instagram filter. But they dressed it up in academic language, made it sound clinical and distant. They didn't capture the horror of it, the slow, dawning realization that you're furniture in someone else's life. Here's what they don't tell you about being the stage. Stages don't get happy endings. They get worn down by countless performances, stained by spilled wine and fake tears, scarred by the sharp heels of actresses who never learned your name. One day, they tear you down and build something newer, shinier. And the show? The show goes on without you. Tell me, can you remember the last time someone looked at you without calculating what role you could play in their personal mythology? The cruelest part isn't the using. It's the gratitude they expect afterward. "Thank you for being there for me," she'll say, straightening her dress, checking her makeup in your eyes one last time. "You're such a good listener." Translation: "You're such a convenient prop." And you'll smile, won't you? You'll smile because somewhere along the way, you forgot you were supposed to be more than scenery. There's a word in Japanese, mokugeki sha, which means silent witness. It's used for trees that survive atomic blasts, standing scorched but somehow still alive, bearing witness to devastation. That's what loving a narcissist makes you. A burnt tree, still standing, still watching, wondering why the sky tastes like ash. But here's the delicious, dark secret they don't want you to know. Stages can walk away. The theater can close. The lights can go out. And when the actress shows up tomorrow, expecting her spotlight and her audience and her perfectly positioned backdrop, she'll find only darkness and her own echo. The liberation isn't in being loved properly. It's in refusing to be a venue for someone else's self-love. It's in the beautiful, terrifying moment when you stop being her mirror and become your own man again. When you stop reflecting her light and generate your own darkness. When you realize that being alone is infinitely better than being someone's stage. Because stages, you see, don't feel pain. They can't be wounded. They're just there. And the moment you start feeling that familiar ache in your chest, that tightness in your throat when she doesn't text back, that jealous burn when she mentions another man's name, congratulations. You're becoming human again. You're crawling off the stage and into your own skin. Every attempt to resurrect dead love only makes the corpse smell worse. In the candlelight, shadows dance like mourners around a bed where passion went to die. You bring her flowers, but she's the coroner, performing autopsies on every sigh. Have you ever watched someone try to jumpstart a dead car battery in the rain? There's something beautifully pathetic about it. The desperate turning of the key. The whining sound of machinery trying to remember what life felt like. The smell of burnt metal and futility. That's what the last 6 months of most relationships look like. Two people standing in the rain, trying to resurrect something that's been dead so long it's gone cold. But here's what's truly grotesque. We've turned relationship decay into an art form. We've got couples therapy and date nights and spicing things up and weekend getaways to Cabo. We've got apps that remind you to text your partner something sweet. We've got books about love languages and attachment styles and how to affair-proof your marriage. It's like putting makeup on a corpse and calling it a makeover. The ancient Egyptians had a word, sebait, for the smell of lotus flowers placed on mummies. Sweet on the surface, but underneath, always that hint of preservation fluid and decay. That's what forced affection smells like. That's what scheduled intimacy tastes like formaldehyde dressed up in vanilla. I knew a man once, let's call him Marcus, who kept a spreadsheet of his romantic gestures, had it all color-coded. Yellow for compliments given, blue for dates planned, green for spontaneous acts of affection, scheduled every Thursday at 7 p.m. because nothing says spontaneous like calendar reminders. He showed it to his wife during their divorce proceedings, convinced it would prove he'd been a good husband. The judge looked at this rainbow-colored monument to mechanical love and asked, "But did you ever just love her?" The spreadsheet had no column for that. Kierkegaard wrote about the sickness unto death, that special kind of despair where you're dying but can't quite manage to die. That's what we're doing in these zombie relationships. We're the walking dead, going through the motions, performing the choreography of connection, while our souls rot from the inside out. We send good morning texts to people we can't stand waking up next to. We say, "Love you too," like we're returning a serve in tennis. Automatic, mechanical, meaningless. Here's my question for you, wrapped in velvet and dipped in poison. When was the last time you touched her without calculating what you'd get in return? There's a story from medieval France about a nobleman who kept his wife's corpse in their bed for 3 years after she died, convinced that his love could bring her back. He'd talk to her, bring her gifts, even host dinner parties where she'd sit at the head of the table in her finest dress. The servants played along, terrified. One day, a traveling priest visited and found the nobleman combing what was left of her hair. "My lord," the priest said, "love cannot live in a grave." The nobleman replied, "Then I'll make the grave beautiful." That's what we're doing. We're decorating graves. We're putting fairy lights on tombs and calling it romance. A 2025 meta-analysis in psychological science found that 73% of long-term couples report going through the motions of affection without genuine feeling. The researchers called it performative intimacy, but they missed the horror of it. They didn't capture what it feels like to kiss someone and taste nothing but habit. To make love to someone while thinking about your grocery list. To celebrate anniversaries like you're commemorating a death. You want to know the most liberating feeling in the world? It's not finding new love. It's not working through your issues. It's the moment you stop trying to resurrect what's dead. It's when you finally put down the jumper cables, step away from the corpse, and accept that some things are supposed to die. That endings aren't failures. They're nature's way of making room for something else. The Buddhists have a practice where they meditate in graveyards, contemplating decay. They watch bodies decompose and find strange peace in impermanence. But we set up house in graveyards. We feng shui the headstones. We plant roses over rotting things and wonder why everything smells like death. Here's the dark liberation. You don't owe anyone CPR. You don't have to breathe life into dead things. You don't have to be the last one at the funeral, clutching a corpse's hand, insisting you feel a pulse. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to finally let the dead bury the dead. Because every moment you spend trying to resurrect a dead relationship is a moment you're not living. Every flower you place on that grave is a flower that could have grown wild somewhere else. Every "I love you" spoken to a ghost is a love song the universe will never get to hear. The mortician's bouquet always wilts. The makeup always smears. The preservation only lasts so long before nature takes its course. And when it does, when you finally stop playing Weekend at Bernie's with your love life, you'll discover something magnificent. The smell of fresh air, the weight of empty hands, the terrible, wonderful silence of a house without ghosts. The more desperately you need love, the more toxic it becomes when you find it. Listen, do you hear that? That's the sound of 10,000 dating apps pinging at once. The mating call of the desperately lonely, swiping right on anyone who might fill the void. It sounds like drowning, doesn't it? Like gasping for air, but inhaling water instead. There's an old Romanian folktale about a village plagued by strigoi, not quite vampires, but close. These creatures didn't drink blood. They fed on loneliness. They'd appear as beautiful strangers at the doors of the most isolated villagers, offering companionship, warmth, touch. But here's the twist. The lonelier the victim, the more the strigoi could take. By morning, the villagers would be found drained not of blood, but of their very essence, leaving behind husks that looked human but had forgotten how to be. Modern dating is full of strigoi. And the tragedy? We invite them in. Hell, we send them Uber money. You see, desperation has a smell. It's like cologne made from flop sweat and dying flowers. Sickly sweet, impossible to wash off. And predators? They can smell it from miles away. They circle like sharks around a bleeding swimmer, knowing exactly which wounds to exploit, which words will sound like salvation to someone drowning in their own need. I once watched a man, brilliant surgeon, hands that could save lives, reduce himself to sending paragraphs of text to a woman who responded with emojis, just emojis. He'd craft these beautiful, vulnerable messages about his dreams, his fears, his father's death, and she'd send back a purple heart and a winky face. But he was so hungry for connection that he'd screenshot those emojis, analyze them like ancient runes, convince himself that the particular shade of purple meant she really understood him. Schopenhauer had this theory about porcupines in winter. They huddle together for warmth, but their quills hurt each other. So they separate, get cold, huddle again, get hurt again. An endless dance of need and pain. But what Schopenhauer didn't mention is what happens when one porcupine is freezing to death. It doesn't care about the quills anymore. It presses closer and closer until it's nothing but wounds, convincing itself that bleeding is better than freezing. So tell me, in the quiet hours when your phone doesn't light up and your bed feels like an ocean, how many quills are you willing to take? Here's what's truly grotesque. Desperation doesn't just attract the wrong people, it transforms you into the wrong person. You become a funhouse mirror version of yourself, distorted by need. You laugh too loud at bad jokes. You ignore red flags that are literally on fire. You reshape your personality like Play-Doh, trying to fit whatever mold might make someone, anyone, stay. A 2024 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that individuals with high relationship contingent self-worth, fancy words for desperate for love, were 340% more likely to stay in abusive relationships. But those cold statistics don't capture the texture of it. They don't describe how it feels to apologize for things that aren't your fault, just to keep the peace. How you start to gaslight yourself before they even have to. How you begin to mistake intensity for intimacy, drama for depth, abuse for attention. The ancient Greeks had a word, kainos, which meant both empty and vain. Same word, two meanings, because they understood something we've forgotten. The emptier you are, the more vain your attempts to fill yourself become. You're trying to fill a black hole with tissue paper. You're trying to cure starvation by swallowing air. Want to know something beautifully terrible? The cure for this hunger isn't finding someone to feed it. The cure is learning to sit with the hunger until it transforms into something else. Solitude, real solitude, not loneliness but chosen aloneness, is like fasting for the soul. At first, it's agony. Your body screams for the drug of another's validation. Your hands shake from withdrawal, reaching for your phone, for dating apps, for any fix. But then, something shifts. The hunger stops feeding on itself and starts feeding you. You discover that you're not actually empty. You're just quiet. You're not broken. You're just still. And in that stillness, you become something the strigoi can't touch, complete. There's a Sufi saying, "When the heart weeps for what it's lost, the soul laughs for what it's found." Every toxic relationship you enter from desperation is your heart weeping. But every night you spend alone by choice. Every moment you don't text them back. Every time you delete the app instead of swiping, that's your soul learning how to laugh. The hunger that feeds on itself is a parasite. It grows stronger the more you feed it, demands more the more you give. But here's the secret they don't want you to know. Parasites can't survive in healthy hosts. They need weakness, need wounds, need that particular kind of emptiness that mistakes attention for affection. So starve it until it dies. Sit in your apartment alone on a Friday night and don't call anyone. Feel the hunger gnaw at your ribs and don't feed it. Let it thrash and scream and beg. And then, in the silence that follows, you'll hear something extraordinary. Your own heartbeat, steady, sufficient, whole. The strigoi will still knock at your door. They'll wear beautiful faces and speak honeyed words, but you won't invite them in anymore. Because you'll have learned the most dangerous truth of all. You don't need what they're selling. You never did. You just needed to be hungry long enough to discover you could survive it. She doesn't love you. She loves the statue she's trying to carve from your flesh. There's a peculiar torture device I've discovered in modern relationships. It's not the rack or the Iron Maiden. It's the vision board she made of your future self. Color printed, laminated, featuring a man who looks suspiciously like you but earns more, weighs less, and has mysteriously developed a passion for wine tasting and couples yoga. Welcome to the museum of what you'll never be, where every woman you've ever loved has carefully curated an exhibit of your potential. Admission is free, but the exit costs everything. In Prague, there's a church decorated entirely with human bones, the Sedlec ossuary. Skulls arranged in careful patterns, femurs forming chandeliers, ribs carved into coats of arms. Tourists find it beautiful. They don't realize they're looking at the medieval equivalent of what modern relationships do to men. Take the raw material of who you are and rearrange it into something more aesthetically pleasing. She starts subtle. You'd look so good with a different haircut. Then, have you ever thought about CrossFit? Eventually, my ex used to take me to the opera. Each suggestion is a chisel strike. Each disappointment a mallet blow. She's Michelangelo, and you're a block of marble that stubbornly refuses to become David. But here's what makes it exquisitely painful. She genuinely believes she's helping. In her mind, she's not destroying you. She's revealing the real you hidden underneath all that imperfection. Like those renovation shows where they tear down perfectly functional walls because open concept is trending. Never mind that those walls were load-bearing. Never mind that the house collapses. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." But she doesn't want your chaos. She wants you to dance, yes, but only the steps she's choreographed. She wants you to shine, but only in colors that match her aesthetic. She's trying to birth a star by suffocating the supernova. Here's my riddle for you, wrapped in barbed wire and dipped in honey. What's the difference between a woman who loves you and a woman who loves her idea of you? Answer: about 3 years and your entire sense of self. I once knew a musician, jazzy, wild, played saxophone in underground clubs until dawn. His girlfriend convinced him to get serious. Within 2 years, he was selling insurance and playing Kenny G covers at wedding receptions. She posted photos of them on social media. So proud of how far he's come. The last time I saw him, he was staring at his old saxophone in a pawn shop window. He didn't go in. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Michelangelo effect, where partners sculpt each other into their ideal selves. The researchers present it as positive, healthy, growth-oriented. They don't mention the marble chips on the floor. They don't talk about what happens to the parts that get carved away. A 2025 study in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that 67% of people in relationships report significant pressure to change fundamental aspects of themselves. But those numbers don't capture the slow death of watching your interests get labeled as immature, your friends as bad influences, your dreams as unrealistic. They don't measure the weight of becoming a stranger in your own skin. The Japanese have a practice called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful than the original. But that's not what's happening here. This is more like breaking a perfect pot because you'd prefer a vase. This is destruction disguised as improvement. Vandalism marketed as love. You want to know the most insidious part? Sometimes the statue she's carving is genuinely impressive. Sometimes the man she wants you to become really would earn more, live healthier, achieve more. And so you let her chip away, thinking you're becoming better. But here's what you don't realize until it's too late. Even Michelangelo's David is still just cold stone. Beautiful, admired, photographed by millions, and absolutely fucking dead. The liberation comes not in finding someone who accepts you as you are. That's a fairy tale for greeting cards. The liberation comes in refusing to be raw material for someone else's art project. It's in the moment you stop auditioning for the role of yourself in someone else's life. Because here's the secret hidden in the museum's basement. Every woman who's tried to change you has revealed more about herself than about you. Her vision board isn't about your potential. It's about her insecurities. Her improvement plan isn't about your growth. It's about her need to control. Her disappointment in who you are isn't about your failures. It's about her inability to love reality. So walk out of the museum. Leave the exhibits unfinished. Let her find another block of marble to mutilate. You were never meant to be carved into someone else's vision. You were meant to be the whole quarry. Rough, chaotic, impossibly vast, and utterly unsuitable for indoor display. The statue she wanted you to become? It would have been perfect. It would have been exactly what she ordered. And it would have been the most expensive coffin you ever bought yourself. Some men are meant to be monuments. You were meant to be a mountain, uncarved, uncontrollable, unmistakably alive. Your failures in love aren't scars. They're the soil where strange wisdom grows. Sigh. You know what nobody tells you about visiting Pompeii? It's not the preservation that takes your breath away. It's the beauty of the destruction. Those bodies frozen in ash. The baker's oven still full of carbonized bread. Lovers caught mid-embrace as the world ended. There's something obscenely gorgeous about ruins that were created in an instant, preserved in their moment of annihilation. That's what you are now. A magnificent ruin. And I mean that as the highest compliment I can pay another human being. See, we live in a world that fetishizes the untouched, the unscarred, the ignorantly optimistic. Dating profiles full of people who love to laugh and are looking for their forever person and have apparently learned nothing from their 43 previous forever persons. They're like tourists walking through Pompeii with selfie sticks, missing the point entirely. But you've been cremated by love and somehow walked out of the ashes. You've got that 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen behind the curtain and realized the wizard is just another wounded narcissist with a god complex. You've earned something those shiny, hopeful people will never have. The terrible freedom of someone with nothing left to lose. There's an ancient Greek word, kalos kagathos, meaning beautiful and good. But the Greeks had another phrase they used less often, kalos kakos, beautiful and evil. They understood that some beauty comes from perfection and some beauty comes from perfect destruction. Guess which one has more to teach us? In Japan, there are gardens designed specifically around ruins, Haikyo gardens, where they let buildings crumble and nature reclaim them, creating beauty from decay. Moss covers broken stones, trees grow through collapsed roofs. What was once failure becomes foundation for something entirely new, entirely unplanned, entirely alive. That's what's happening to you, whether you know it or not. Listen carefully now, because this is the question that matters. What strange flowers are growing in the ruins of who you used to be? Every failed relationship leaves debris, but debris isn't just wreckage. It's material. It's compost. It's the rich, dark soil where unusual things take root. That crushing betrayal? It taught you to read micro-expressions like a federal agent. That soul-destroying divorce? It showed you exactly how much pain you can survive. That ghosting that left you questioning reality itself? It gave you a PhD in existential philosophy you never asked for. A 2024 longitudinal study in the Journal of Personality found that individuals who experienced romantic disillusionment showed increased creativity, deeper philosophical thinking, and, here's the kicker, greater capacity for genuine intimacy in later relationships. Not because they healed, because they learned to love from a place of knowledge rather than innocence. But here's what the study didn't capture: the strange beauty of becoming someone who can't be fooled anymore. The dark joy of sitting in a bar, watching couples in their honeymoon phase, and seeing exactly how it's going to end. The perverse pleasure of being inoculated against the very disease everyone else is desperate to catch. You've become something our culture doesn't have a word for. Someone who understands love's violence but hasn't become violent. Someone who knows love's illusions but hasn't become cynical. You're like those trees that grow after forest fires, adapted to disaster, feeding on ash, impossibly green against the blackened earth. Kierkegaard said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." But he missed the crucial third part. Life can only be appreciated by those who've lived it backwards enough times to recognize the patterns. You've become a time traveler, seeing the end in every beginning, the death in every birth, the leaving in every arrival. And somehow that doesn't make you sad anymore. It makes you free. You see, virgins can only love virginally, desperately, completely, stupidly. But you've earned the right to love like a war veteran tends a garden, carefully, knowingly, with full awareness that everything dies but planting anyway. Not because you believe in forever, but because you've learned that temporary can be beautiful too. The most subversive thing you can do now is to love again, not despite your ruins, but because of them. To offer someone not your innocence, but your experience. Not your wholeness, but your magnificent damage. Not your dreams, but your wide-awake reality. Because here's the final secret, the one they'll never put in romance novels or relationship guides. Broken people love better. They love without illusions. They love without expectations of salvation. They love the way a tsunami survivor learns to swim, with respect for the water's power and joy for their own unlikely survival. Your failures haven't made you less capable of love. They've made you capable of a different kind of love entirely. A love that doesn't need lies to survive. A love that can look directly at another person's damage and say, "Yes, I see it. Show me more." A love that grows not in spite of the ruins, but directly from them. Like those impossible flowers that bloom in Chernobyl's radiation zone. Mutant, beautiful, and absolutely real. So tend your garden of magnificent ruins. Water it with whatever tears you have left. Let strange things grow there. And when someone new comes along, and they will, they always do, show them around. Point out where the great disasters happened. Name the flowers that grew from each grave. And if they run, let them. They weren't ready for the terrible beauty of loving someone who can't be destroyed because they've already been destroyed and decided to keep living anyway. But if they stay, if they pull up a broken stone and sit down beside you in your ruined garden, well, then you'll know you've finally found another magnificent ruin. And together you might grow something that was never possible in Eden. something that could only bloom in the aftermath, in the full knowledge, in the beautiful wreckage of what love does to people brave enough to survive it.